hi this afternoon. And we thank all of you who recommend people to the forum committee. And Michelle's in the front row almost every week. So when you have someone who you hear or a topic you want to hear about, please let her know. It's interesting today that Greg Jung is with us today because of a red dress. And his wife is Jack, and I take Pilates from his wife, who is one of the most wonderful teachers I've ever met. And she sent pictures from this event. And so we get our speakers through various ways of them in Washington, D.C., where Greg was awarded the Unsung Hero Award for the United States. And I said, well, what? And at that, and right after that, he was awarded here at CSUS. He was recognized for his work in our community here. So another clap for Greg. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I said, well, what are you doing in that red dress with that handsome man? And then that's what she told me. So Greg is a long-term resident of Folsom. He is also the executive VP of the Organization of Chinese Americans in our community. And he also works with not only works, is on the board with the History Museum in Folsom. And we're going to see how that winds its way through his presentation today. Interestingly enough, he and his wife have two sons who love to take them on trips. So that's a big tribute and tells you something more about this family. He's been involved in civil rights issues for over 20 years in the Sacramento area. John Lewis said, if you see something that is not right, not fair, not just do you have a moral obligation to do something about it. And our speaker today, Greg Jung, is doing just that and has for many years. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Barbara. Thank you.
Good to have you.
Nice. Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Jack. Cool. Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone, on this Friday afternoon. It's beautiful outside, and I give you a lot of credit coming in here to hear about the issues of civil rights that Chinese Americans and other API folks dealt with during COVID. My presentation today, I'm not going to talk about politics. I'm not going to talk about geopolitics, but I want to give you a perspective of what was happening here, primarily in Sacramento during COVID-19 pandemic. And the premise of all of this is history repeating itself. I'm chair of the Folsom History Museums up in Folsom, and so history is near and dear to my heart. And I'm basically going to break this down, our meeting today, in three parts. And the reason this meeting or this presentation, we were asked by the Asian community, primarily the Chinese community in Sacramento, to help. My organization, sorry about that. So our agenda today is I'm briefly going to review with you the history of anti-Asian sentiment in the US and in Sacramento. I'm going to review the anti-Asian sentiment during the COVID-19 pandemic and how it impacted the Asian community here in Sacramento. I'm going to review a couple of local cases of things that took place and how, as an organization, this group I'm with called OCA, how we dealt with it. And again, we were getting contacted by people in the community needing help. They didn't know where to go to. And they didn't have the contacts, whether it's through law enforcement, through local and state government, that they could go to. So they reached out to us because we've been here in Sacramento working with the Asian community close to 32 years. So I'll review a case of something that we got involved in and there was some resolution. And then finally, here at Sacramento State, I was here, I think, 3 times during the pandemic, twice virtually, once in person, working with students here in Sacramento State on how to deal with being bullied and how to fight for your rights. And as bystanders who may see somebody involved in a bullying incident, how can you help? So that's basically the premise of my 45 minutes with you today. A little bit of history, some real world experiences with the pandemic here in Sacramento, and then think of it as we did with students, and I also did this with corporations. If you see someone getting bullied, how can you help? If you're getting bullied, how can you get help? So that's what we'll be doing today. And then we'll wrap it up with a lot of Q&A. Okay? All right. Okay, so again, this organization I'm with called OCA. We are a nonprofit API community resource. We've been around over 50 years, dedicated to advancing the social, political, economic well-being of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders throughout the country. We have about 35 chapters. Our Sacramento chapter, we've been here for about 35 years, 32 years, touching hundreds of thousands of APIs each year. We're based in Washington, D.C. All right, putting on my history hat. Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Winston Churchill, 1948. Again, the focus of our discussion right now is history repeating itself? For almost, close to 50 years, I grew up in Utah. And then my family moved to California back in the 70s. Back in Utah, I was called names all the time because there weren't many of us. There were more Japanese than Chinese. And again, my heritage is Chinese. And the focus of our discussion today will be probably more focused with Chinese Americans. But in Utah, I got bullied all the time, right? I was a young kid and not many Chinese in my schools. And so being called names and all that stuff, it happened frequently. Well, coming out to California, we moved to the Bay Area. And there were a lot of Chinese, a lot of Chinese. I think I was overwhelmed with how many Chinese folks were in my high school. Well, during COVID, this is probably spring of 2020. My 2 sons live in the Bay Area, and they're both in IT. And when we're talking about the pandemic, their focus was how to flatten the curve. I had no idea what they were talking about. They were telling me, Dad, what are you doing to flatten the curve? I don't know. Well, what's this whole thing? What does COVID-19 mean to you? Well, how do we deal with anti-Asian hate? So the perspective that my kids had, and they're Chinese, with COVID-19 was much different because of where they're living in San Francisco and what are the things they can do to flatten the curve. But, I'm walking. So it's spring of 2020. My wife, Arlene, says, you know what? I think we should wear a mask because I think that's how we can help flatten the curve. Okay. So, I wore a mask and I'm walking into a store in the morning. A gentleman is walking out of the store. I just said, good morning. Yeah, that's what I do. And as he walked past me, he said, F you. And he said that C word, right? I haven't been called that name, in 50 years. But wearing a mask, looking like the way I do, it was alarming. The second day I'm in Sacramento and I'm at another shopping center or store. The person looked at me, 2 of them did, and they screamed at me, you effing, that name again, you're a devil and go back to China. It's what's happening to us now. It's all your fault. Okay, oh my God, I can't believe it. So, from a personal experience, I was just called names. And for a lot of my counterparts, similar things were happening to them in Sacramento. For some of my colleagues with my organization, they didn't know what the history was. They said, what's up with all this? All I'm hearing now on the media is anti-Asian hate. Why is it so bad? And my response to them was, it's not new. This has been going on for a long time. So there's just a little bit of history. And I'm focusing primarily with California, but I do have a couple of federal cases that took place. So the foreign miners tax in 1850. So this is a tax that levied, if you're a Chinese miner, it was a $20 per month tax that was levied against you. $20 a month back in 1850, that's a lot of money. But no other miners, this tax was not levied upon them. The Act of 1858. It was a California law sought to end immigration of all Chinese and Mongolians into California. There were a lot of incidents up and down the state of California driving Chinese out of their communities from Eureka over to Weed, all the way down to Los Angeles. And this book here called Driven Out is a good book that, I've read numerous times. It just depicts and explains in each community what was happening to the Chinese population. But there are a lot of incidents where the Chinese were kicked out and their Chinatowns were burnt down. For example, in Folsom, the Chinatown was probably the third largest in California. You had Los Angeles, San Francisco, but Folsom at one time had 3,000 Chinese that lived in the old part of Folsom. And that Chinatown was burnt down 4 times. And the last time in 1906, that was the last time they never rebuilt. But that was a common strategy that local townsfolk did to kick out the Chinese. For example, Truckee, they used the term they used, what is a Truckee method to drive out the Chinese? And in Truckee, they would not allow the Chinese to buy any provisions. They're going to starve them out of Truckee. Up in Eureka, they booted out all the Chinese throughout the county. And there were billboards in San Francisco welcoming non-Chinese to come back up to Eureka because the Chinese are out. And burning down the Chinatown was one of their methods to drive the Chinese out. And they called that the Eureka method. The Geary Act. This is a federal law, actually federal law that California Representative Thomas Geary proposed. And there was a law that was passed, and I have to get my reading glasses on. Excuse me. And basically it said all Chinese have to carry a resident card with them at all times. And if you're caught and you don't have your resident card, you could be deported. And then finally, I skipped the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. So this was the first law that designated a specific group from a national origin to no longer be allowed to be immigrated into the United States. And if you had been a resident of the United States, you could not get citizenship. This is 1882. This law was only supposed to last 10 years. But with continuous review of the law, it wasn't repealed until 1943. So again, and to wrap up this history piece, and I'll come back to it, but the other expulsions throughout the area Happened in Anderson, Auburn, Dixon, Lincoln. Oh my gosh, I spelled Lincoln wrong. I apologize. Bad eyes. Oh my God, they did Merced too. I apologize. It's my wife's fault. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, it's not a kid. Merced, Nevada City, Placerville. I used a real small computer laptop when I was typing this, and I couldn't see it. Oh my God. Placerville, Red Bluff, Redding, Sacramento, Sonoma, Vallejo, Wheatland. All these communities had incidents where they had Chinese residents, whether it's miners, railroad workers, levee builders where Chinese lived, but they had incidents of exclusion and expulsion. And I'm going to move away because bad spelling. God, terrible. Okay. Is history repeating itself today? Was history repeating itself during the pandemic? This is in the 1800s, early 1800s, mid 1800s. The term yellow peril was used throughout the country. And at that time, the US, from a federal standpoint and also locally here in California, were very concerned with Chinese coming into the country. We're taking away the jobs. We're not assimilating within the community. Lawless, dirty, very uncomfortable with the Chinese situation. And the term that they used back in the 1800s was a yellow peril. Okay. From 1904 to 1900 to 1904, there was a bubonic plague outbreak in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Honolulu. 119 people died in San Francisco from the bubonic plague. 11 died in Honolulu. And with this bubonic plague, what the San Francisco leadership, local leaders declared an emergency, medical emergency, and they closed down Chinatown in San Francisco, which at that time had over 20,000 residents. So if you're Chinese, you were stuck in Chinatown. You couldn't go anywhere. If you weren't Chinese, you could go in and out of Chinatown. But again, think of that term, history repeating itself. San Francisco Chronicle had articles about this is a fake disease. This is a disease that's been manifested by the health department to get more monies. So again, this hope, the parallel between the bubonic plague and with the COVID pandemic, yellow peril to what we did with the China flu, the Wuhan flu, the Kung flu. This all drove the increase in anti-Asian sentiment back in 1900 to 1904. Now we carry that over to COVID-19. How many of you knew of the bubonic plague that happened in San Francisco? Yeah. So again, 119 died. Doesn't compare to what happened with COVID-19. But again, it was interesting that there was sentiment out there that this was a fake disease. It's not real. It was manifested by the health department. The Folsom Telegraph newspaper in 1904 wrote an article that the Chinese in Chinatown in Folsom were dirty, sickly heathens, and that we got to do something to make sure this doesn't happen out in Folsom in regards to the bubonic plague. Again, sentiment about with almost 3,000 Chinese, not an uncomfortable setting for the Chinese at that time. All right, so again, group I'm with, OCA, nationwide, we started having programs and workshops like this to deal with COVID-19 and the anti-Asian hate or hate that was being generated by the pandemic. So a lot of rhetoric, occurring during the pandemic. I mentioned a couple of names: Wuhan flu, Chinese flu, Kung flu. Wearing my mask. I was not well received in places wearing a mask. This is again back in 2020, and it just made people feel uncomfortable. And so other people in the API community were hearing stories, what was happening to them, discrimination acts, hate crimes, hate incidents. And so they came to us with OCA to see, can we help provide a workshop? 11,000 were reported incidents of hate during 2020, 2021, 2022. We strongly believe that these numbers were underreported because culturally, I was brought up by my parents is that don't make a fuss. If something happens to you at school, you're getting bullied, don't make a fuss, don't make waves. It'll go away. So that's what we experienced with the Asian community here, is that a lot of folks did not want to call the police. They were fearful of dialing 911. They were fearful of talking to the police about what took place. Because culturally, there was a mistrust with law enforcement. You think about that. Those folks that came from China, they escaped China. They escaped the regime that they're dealing with. Dealing with the police here, same sentiment. They were not comfortable with it. So our training that we were working with the people in the community, number one was multilingual. We were able to bring translators in. We shared with them what's taking place today with the pandemic. And if you're involved or if you're a victim of a crime, what to do. Because typically what would happen if mom and dad got robbed or assaulted or attacked or verbally abused, they would call their kids first. And they're going, I'm calling my son, I'm calling my daughter, we'll go from there. And then by the time the children were telling their parents, you got to call 911, it was too late. And the translation services here in Sacramento are good, but not great. And so there was delays in getting translation services, which also delayed in handling and investigating this case. So our charge was to provide community resources that are available to them. We brought law enforcement in with a lot of our community workshops. And again, the number of 11,000 crimes being submitted into the database, we believe that's greatly underreported. I'll quickly go over this. I want to make sure. Oh gosh, it's 3:30. Okay. No, I'm going to skip this one. I've talked about it a lot. Okay, as an organization, we were also training other nonprofit organizations what to do if you're involved or somebody comes to you and says they need help. So basically, we had to do an assessment on the case. We had to provide resources that are available. We had to communicate the issues. How are we going to communicate it? Well, social media, print media. We had to work with other community groups because we didn't want to be in a silo. So we worked in coalition with a lot of other organizations, religious organizations, to help us work with the community. And finally, we did some things in regards to systematic change. So when a hate crime occurred, our job as an organization with OCA is to do a situational assessment. So some of the things that we looked at in regards to the response is that we worked with other communities that were dealing with hate crimes. We worked with these other organizations. We provided a common response, a common theme with all the organizations that we dealt with. We focused and we're very critical in the way we helped out the individual victims. And we helped the victims file reports when they needed help. Again, the intimidation factor of calling 911, dealing with law enforcement, filing a complaint, a report was overwhelming for many of the people. What law enforcement asked us to help the community is clearly define whether or not this was a hate crime or a hate incident. So what happened to me wearing a mask, being called out by the individual at the store or the next day at another shopping center, that's a hate incident at the bottom. Any acts, conduct, speech, or expression that are bias motivated, it's not punishable under the law. I didn't feel physically threatened. I didn't have any economic damage occur to me. So basically examples of hate incident: verbal harassment, ridicule, threats, insults, slurs. Through the pandemic, that was most of the activity that we're dealing with. What a hate crime is, which is a criminal offense, it's committed against a person or property and motivated in whole or in part by the offender's bias against a race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, gender, or disability. So our current Attorney General here in California, Rob Bonta, shared with a group at Folsom, Fresno City College this week, is that hate crimes are difficult to prosecute because getting to find out the offender's bias against a race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, that's difficult. There's some cases that are clear cut. The shooting that took place in Atlanta at the spas. Well, the shooter, if you look at his manifesto that was on social media, it was clear. These acts were based on race, national origin. But for other cases, it's not quite clear. They don't show that history of that bias. So again, a hate crime prosecution is not easy. Okay, so step one when working with the victim, is it a hate incident, hate crime? We also worked with the victims. What are the resources available that they can use? Some of them could even boil down to they need professional help. Psychologist, a counselor. We worked really hard with local media, whether it's Sacramento Bee, television stations, Channel 10, Channel 13, Channel 8. Especially during the years of 2020 and 2021, we would get calls and emails all the time. We've heard an incident occurred. Can we do an interview? We did an interview here in Sacramento State, just the next building over, talking about how we're helping out the CSU students here dealing with hate crimes. Press releases, our organization, we worked tirelessly to send out press releases timely, accurate. We're a nonprofit. We had to be very careful. We had to be non-political. Social media. So whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, a lot of these organizations are very involved. And these are just some of the posts that we posted during the pandemic. And again, community building is extremely important. And this was sponsored by the U.S. Department of Justice. We had many town halls with different folks from different backgrounds get together to talk about issues. So whether it's the Hispanic community, Black community, Jewish community, religious groups, and with Zoom meetings, it was very convenient during the pandemic. We would get together and we would share with the groups, these are things that we're dealing with, because it's so easy to get caught up in your silo and not knowing what's happening with other communities. Having a meeting like this was helpful for the people who are participating. Systematic change, especially after the Atlantic shooting, we worked very closely with the White House. And I'll go over a law that was passed in a federal law dealing with anti-Asian hate or anti-hate and hate crimes during the pandemic. We did a lot of community work building in Sacramento. Most of the attacks that were taking place were against women, generally older women, usually at the workplace, usually at a retail outlet, a retail store. So we were focusing a lot, stopping the attacks on Asian women. We had vigils at the Capitol, which were important. because it brought up that this is a serious matter. Media was invited. Okay. So now we talk about a particular case that occurred at a Japanese restaurant in Elk Grove. So things again that we focused on in dealing with the case: treating the victim seriously, practice active listening, be compassionate, ask before you touch, even a simple touch on the shoulder for people who's been attacked. It's shocking, it's alarming. So we would ask, can I talk to you? Can I give you a hug? Something of that nature. Ask before you act. We always left it to the victims. Do you want us to help? These are things that we think that we can go forward with this. Is this something you're comfortable with? If it's not, we didn't push it. Provide culturally relevant resources. Again, documentation in language was incredibly important. And do not take things personally, because sometimes we found out from the victims, leave me alone. I don't know your organization. I don't want you in my business, but I don't want your help. Don't take it personally. Okay, in this particular case, this occurred in 2021. Over the evening, this individual spray painted on this Japanese restaurant, all on the windows of the restaurant, FU Gook. Now, Gook is usually a term that's used for people in Southeast Asia, right? The Vietnam War. This is a Japanese restaurant owned by Koreans. But this individual was really upset because they were camping out overnight in the back, and the restaurant owner said, you can't camp out here anymore. You got to move on. So this individual with their buddies overnight spray painted all throughout the building, all these racial slurs. Well, first thing in the morning at 7:30, we started getting notified by KCRA and Channel 10. In Elk Grove, they have a community website called, I think, Elk Grove Live. And it was posted that this occurred at this restaurant in Elk Grove. We started getting calls from the restaurant owners stating, what can we do? We need help. This never happened to us before. So immediately we contacted the news stations. We had set up interviews. We put posts on Facebook and on Twitter on what took place. And that ask from the restaurant owners is that our business is so tight right now because of the pandemic, closing down a couple of days to clean up the paint because paint was everywhere. We can't close down too long. We need the money. So we sent out an urgent Facebook post and on Twitter that the owners need help. They need help by patrons going to the store because they're going to reopen as soon as they can. And if you can come by the restaurant and help clean up, they would greatly appreciate it. So all this was taking place usually, I think, before 9 o'clock in the morning. So social media was activated, interviews took place. There's an article in the Sacramento Bee. And so what was amazing, residents of Elk Grove that morning went to the restaurant and started cleaning up. And by 12 o'clock that day, they were able to reopen. And these are just what some of them were restaurant patrons, some of them were not strangers. They're just so upset what took place in their community, they came to help. The police were called first thing in that morning, and by that night, they had captured this guy. And for the Elk Grove police, a hate crime was filed. I mean, it's really clear, right? Especially with all the things that were written on the windows. So this is a success story that took place because People knew where to get help. They knew to ask for help. And fortunately for my organization, we have been involved in so many cases that we were able to activate pretty quickly. Okay. We're going to wrap it up talking about if you're a victim or if you witness someone being a victim, how can you help? So, as a bystander, if you see someone being attacked, abused, things that we can do, we can distract, take the attention away from the victim, take the attention away from the abuser. It could be simply as this. Oh, excuse me, where's the restroom? Or, excuse me, is this Mendocino Hall? I mean, a simple distraction to calm the situation down. But remember, as a bystander, it's so important. Your safety is paramount. If you feel that it's not safe for you to intervene, may now be able to do it. Again, your safety is paramount. Next, delegate. This is called the bystander situation in Boston with a woman was stabbed. Everybody heard it. It was at night. It was in the 60s. Right? But no one took action because everyone thought somebody else was going to call the police. Have you been in a situation where you saw maybe a car on fire on the side of the road? Should I call 911? Oh, I think so many other people saw that. I think they'll take care of it. Well, as a bystander, especially if there's a group of people who are seeing what's taking place, sometimes it's hard to get help because people are going to assume somebody else is going to get help. Document. Well, now with phones, everybody's documenting everything. Delay. It's almost the same as distraction. Just trying to check in to slow down the situation, or even delay to get the police, law enforcement there, right? Call 911. It may take minutes for people to come there. Delaying the situation, police can arrive on time. And finally, direct. Takes a lot of guts, calling out the person, the abuser. Michelle, it's wrong. I think this is wrong what you're saying. This person is physically upset. What you're saying is wrong. Don't do it. I'm calling the police. I'm filming you. Takes a lot of guts. Okay. Let's watch a quick video about this.
created using Powtoon.
Okay. If I can get some help, we're at the tail end here almost. Can you come up? And Michelle, can you come up? Deborah, can you come up? Okay. Barbara, can you come up? Thanks. Okay, so this is something we did here at Sacramento State with the students. So right here, Janet is going to be the victim. Okay, nothing's going to happen. And you're going to be bystanders. Okay. So again, what we find sometimes when there's a large group of people who are seeing something taking place, a victim being abused, is that the group doesn't know who's going to take charge. So I'm going to yell at Janet. No, I won't. But I need you to select who's going to be the leader. And then the leader should delegate tasks to other people. For example, who's going to call the police, who's going to videotape, and who's going to intervene. Okay, can you do that? Okay. So I'm not going to abuse. I'm just standing here. Okay, she's a victim.
Yep.
Take charge.
What's going on here? Are we all okay? No, I don't think we are. Michelle, can you call the police? Okay, Barbara, can you video what's going on here? Yeah. So,
You did great. Now there's another situation. Okay, Barbara, come over here. Okay, and in this situation, Janet needs help, but she's too afraid to ask for help. So you guys, three over here. So Janet, again, you're being abused. You need help, but you're very afraid of the situation. Give eye contact to someone. Because what they have found as a victim, if I'm looking at someone, I may mouth the words if you can, right? Or just giving eye contact to someone will take, maybe that person will start taking action. Okay. So you're afraid you can't you can't yell for help? No. No. So again, if you're a victim, giving eye contact for someone to help you is almost as good as yelling for help. It may create that sense of urgency that one of you could say, oh my God. Or you may respond like you're giving eye contact. And I may go, do you need help? Yeah. So that's, again, people are so afraid asking for help. Direct eye contact can hopefully generate that help. Okay, that's it. You did great. Applause. Round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, to tie things together again, thank you. Thank you. Is history repeating itself? So current trends with anti-Asian sentiment. Again, think it back of your mind. Is history repeating itself? I'm not getting political here or geopolitical. But right now in Florida, the case went to appellate court today in Florida on continuing with the law that was signed by the Florida governor last year of banning purchase of property in Florida if you're not, well, if you're a Chinese resident, you're immigrated from China, you cannot buy pieces of property in Florida. There's 15 states that have enacted this law. But right now, it's going through the Florida Supreme Court, Federal Appellate Court to determine the validity of whether or not you can buy property if you're not a US citizen from these various countries. Russia, Syria, Iran, some Central American countries. But the penalties are stiffest if you sell a property in Florida to someone who is a Chinese immigrant. As a Chinese immigrant, you may be thrown in jail for 5 years for trying to buy that house. The seller could be thrown in jail for a year. the Chinese air balloon incident. Remember that one when the air balloon was floating across the United States? And for me, I was thinking, there's yellow peril floating right there. Again, the sentiment and the anti-Asian sentiment really grew. So all we're hearing in the media is China spy balloon, China spy balloon. TikTok. So legislation to ban TikTok in the US because of the potential spying programming that could occur from TikTok. District Attorney Tin Ho, District Attorney for County of Sacramento, filing a lawsuit against the city of Sacramento due to the homelessness. Sacramento Bee editor wrote an article calling him a supreme dictator of homeless enforcement. Well, after that article was written, we went right after the SAC Bee and said, what the heck's going on here? We went right to the writer. Do you know what supreme dictator means in our culture? It means a dictator, maybe from North Korea, maybe from China. Again, strong connotations of anti-Asian hate. Chinese engineers are not hired in the tech field. I know this to be a fact, that if you are a Chinese immigrant and you're trying to work in the IT industry, I don't think they're not going to hire you. And then Chinese professors are being fired. Again, potential of spying activity from the yellow peril. Now, on the plus side, after the shootings in Atlanta, a lot of community organizations, nonprofits went to the White House and said, something has to be done. So the current administration signed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act in May of 2021. And with this act, it allowed funding to go to law enforcement to help them deal better with cultural issues in the community. It provided funding for better record keeping of hate crimes and make it easier for people to file a hate crime complaint with the Department of Justice. Monies are filtered down to the states to work with grassroots organizations to help work with the community, helping with the community. And the California, Asian and Pacific Islander Equity Budget, part of that funding, again, filtered down to organizations to work directly with the community. And that's been helpful for us to provide education to the API community. Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Jose, Antioch. They apologize to the Chinese communities for the past atrocities. And this all took place in the past couple of years. AB 1354, K through 12. It will be enacted in 2025, K through 12, ethnic studies, dealing with all various cultures and making sure that's in the curriculum K through 12. And then finally here in Sacramento, Full Circle Project. We've been closely involved with Full Circle Project, the PETA Center, to provide education support for the API students here in Sacramento State. Finally, my plug as the chair of Folsom History. We're building a Chinese Heritage Museum in Folsom, right near where we think Chinatown was. We purchased a home from the Chan family, longtime residents of Folsom. And this is the rendering that we have regards to what this museum will look like. We're going to have a moon gate that will have a garden, Asian garden, and inside we're going to have a lot of exhibits dealing with the history of Chinese in Folsom, the issues that the Chinese experienced in Folsom and around the community, and then how do we move forward? That's it. Yes.
Hold on. First of all, thank you so much, Greg. This was chilling and informative and in part heartwarming. So thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
And let's take questions. So, okay.
I'd just like to know if you can tell us what street the museum is going to be on in Folsom.
Right on Sutter Street.
Hi, this is excellent. You know, just a comment, two of my best friends were victims of Asian, not a hate crime, but an incident in Sacramento during the pandemic. One, she and her husband were just walking in the neighborhood and some vile person screamed at them, "Go back where you came from." And they're like, and they've been here over 50 years from the Philippines. And my other best friend, Lily, was at a restaurant during the pandemic with another friend, and they looked all around and waited forever, and they never got served on it and finally just left. So that one was very direct, the other one was very subtle, but both victims. It's horrible.
Thanks for sharing. I think Dave has a question. Oh, we'll get to you, Dave.
Could you explain more the nuance with the DA? Because, from someone who's worked in homeless advocacy for a long time, I'm furious with him. So what line was it that SACB crossed and how could they have done it differently?
Just taking away the term supreme dictator. Oh, not using the term supreme dictator. Yes, exactly. That's it. Not his actions, just that title.
Yes, you mentioned the Florida has passed a law restricting land sales to Chinese nationals. This appears to be very reminiscent of California's 1913 law, which prohibited land sales to aliens ineligible for citizenship, i.e. Asians.
That's right. Exactly. Is history repeating itself? Thank you. I think we got Dave, and then we'll come to you. Okay.
Yeah, I'm coming.
I can help you. Exercise. Oh my gosh.
My steps.
Are we on? Yes, thank you for your presentation. My name's Dave.
Thanks,
And
Dave.
I just took two issues in your presentation. One is with D and Ho. If it's the comment somebody made him a dictator was plus or minus for the Asian community. And the fact that he sued to remove those people from that campus because there's a landfill pollution issue, I believe. And the nature of extremely liberal Californians would be that, well, we let them move in and then sometime later somebody will get sick and then some enterprising lawyer will make a class action suit about everybody. And that's the way I feel about it.
Good point. Good point. Again, my comments not political. It's just the name that was used.
I have a comment to ask you.
Yes.
What is your feeling about what's going on YouTube? On YouTube, there are two people that are really vicious and vile anti-China haters.
Mhm.
One is called Lao Y86, LAOWYWHY, and he has over 1 million followers. And the other person is a South African, and he goes by the name of Serpenza. The ZA stands for South Africa. And what they are doing on an almost weekly basis is spewing anti-China hate.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking to myself, why is this tolerated on YouTube? I'm thinking if this had been anti-Semitic comments by a couple of people, they will be banned right away. And the same if they make comments about African Americans, what they're doing about Chinese people, they would be banned right away. Why is this permissive attitude prevalent in the US? And how do you take into account the US government has appropriated $500 million every year to basically anti-Chinese propaganda? What can we do to fight this? This is not the American way.
I agree. So my first response is that I don't know those sites.
They're really vicious.
And the reason I don't is because when I review them and look at them, I can't sleep at night. Right? It got to the point where I had so much overload dealing with all the hate. I got to watch fun stuff. Or again, I'm not sleeping. I'm not discounting what you're saying. What can we do? I'll give you my card after and let's talk about, because we can direct this towards my national office. We have a direct conduit to the White House. Okay, great.
Okay.
Do you have time for
uh,
one more?
One last question, real short, real short.
In El Dorado County, there's a Japanese settlement. It's called Wakamatsu
Mhm.
that you might go to, and there's quite a bit of history. And also at the Marshall Gold Discovery site in the museum, you'll get some other history, and they've had some pretty positive, I think, feedback that seemed to be true, not just anyway, it's a real good thing, you know, to take your kids to, your grandkids, and then talk about if it's true or not and do some research on it.
Great point. On that note, with Folsom History, one more plug. We're having a fundraising event next week. If you're interested, I have some flyers here. That's it. No
Great.
more marketing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again, Greg.